Hey friends, hope you're doing well. I'm sitting out here on the back porch in East Nashville on a very, very hot day, just kind of relaxing. I read something this morning and it stuck in my mind just all day long, so I thought maybe I would share it with you guys. Figured if it stuck in my head, maybe it was worth sharing. This is an interview with Paul McCartney, and I'll tell you more about it here in a little bit. But the question that kind of stuck in my head just said, "Do you feel nostalgic for the past?" And Paul McCartney's answer was, "Nostalgia is not the right word because it implies something sort of wrong. I love the past. There are parts of the past I hate, of course. My mom died, Linda died, John died, and George died, so I can't say I love everything about it, but I have a great affection for the past. And why shouldn't I? I was just some kid from Liverpool who walked around the streets with John Lennon and wrote songs with him, and met this beautiful girl from New York, then married her and had kids with her. Why shouldn't I love the past? Mine's been good." It made me think about how we always look at, I do think nostalgia has a, like, we think of nostalgia in a bad way. And, but it's all right to, you may not want to go back and relive your past or whatever, but what's wrong with enjoying the good parts about it and admitting when things went well for you? And I don't know. This is an interview in LA Weekly from, when was it? January 16th, 2009. Christine McKenna did the interview. And there were a couple, it's a really, really short interview. I think it was a phone thing. And but there's a couple things that I think they really hit on in a deep way. You might hear my dog Wendell barking in the background. He wants to be part of this in some way. So if you hear that, that's Wendell. The question was, when people approach you on the street, what do they want? And Paul answered, more often than not, they just want to communicate. And it's normally quite cool. Everybody these days has a camera on their phone, so now they ask, can I have a photograph with you? I say I'd rather not, because if I have a photograph with you, then somebody else will see us and say, I've got a phone and I'd like a photograph too. Think about that. Paul McCartney doesn't owe any of us anything when he's out in the world trying to have some time, you know. And it's cool when people want to take photographs, but if they don't, I completely understand where everywhere he goes, every moment of his day could be filled with crowds of people asking for photographs, and you have to deal with it somehow. But I don't know, just a little glimpse into his life right there. He says, it's funny, I was talking to a celebrity friend, and he made the point that people who don't even like your work line up for autographs and photographs, saying, I can get one for my grandma. Often when I'm approached for a photograph or autograph, I try to persuade the person that what we really want is communication. That takes longer than signing a quick autograph, but it's an important point to make. And I've said this for a while. Maybe what he said right here goes against that for some people, but Paul McCartney seems to be one of the rare celebrities that seems to handle all of that really well, where he tries to de-escalate and just be human. He knows everybody that walks up to him is probably kind of freaking out a little bit because it's Paul McCartney. If they know who he is, then they probably hold him in high regard. And it would be weird to, you know, it has to be odd. He seems to do it really well. Bill Murray's another one that really handles it well. And there's nothing normal. These are the things that kind of stuck in my head today, because I think about this stuff sometimes. There's a certain level of fame that is just not normal. Humans were never ever meant for that. As animals, we don't have any way to deal with that. And like I've talked before about, if you end up on some rocket ship ride like Kurt Cobain or whatever. Just how weird that would be and how hard it would be for the most well-adjusted individuals to deal with. It'd be a very difficult thing. And the truth is, most people aren't super well-adjusted. So it would bring out just a lot of anxieties and problems. I have friends that, are nowhere on the Paul McCartney scale or whatever, but just tiny bit of fame or whatever, that have a hard time dealing with it because it just feels weird. Like, people will look at you different one day. They just look at you differently, and it's a hard thing to explain, but and you want to de-escalate that any way you can and just get a little bit of normalcy in your life. Getting a little deep here, a little deeper than I wanted to, but that's kind of why it stuck in my head, some of this that Paul McCartney was saying. Because if anybody has ever dealt with this stuff, a Beatle has dealt with this stuff. It says, are you able to move about the world with freedom? He says, with impunity. I go into shops, to movies, and I walk around. I'm now in a car heading into London with my longtime assistant, and if we need to stop at a shop or petrol station, we will. I've always held on to that, and it's a very important part of who I am. And he says, this is the interviewer, what an amazing thing to be able to walk into a shop and make people happy simply by walking in. And Paul says, tell me about it. I'm very aware of that, and it's incredible. Be a little bit of a superpower. I remember somebody telling me a story. It seems like it was in Colorado, where they were at some big outdoor sporting event, and it was like a minor league thing, and there was a crowd, but it wasn't a huge crowd. And this friend of mine looked over in the stands and realized that just down the way a little bit there's a Paul McCartney sitting there with a friend, and they're kind of going unrecognized. And the friend was just kind of like, what in the hell? It's Paul McCartney. And then Paul looked over and kind of caught eye contact with him and gave him a little, wink or whatever. And he just completely left him alone, thinking, wow, this is him. He's out about and not being recognized and bothered. And it's a cool friend of mine. They just let him be. And but imagine if that's every day of your life. And some people like Bill Murray seems to handle it really well, where he can make a big joke of it, and I love that. And even I love the videos of him with fans where they just act out something. Remember, there's a story. I think John D. Graham told me this, who passed away earlier this year, about Bill Murray coming into the Continental Club and watching John D. playing, and just kind of standing there being one of the folks, and people not bothering him. And I dig that. The interviewer, Christine McKenna, thought ahead of time and just kind of hit him with some fast ones early off, and says, how old do you feel emotionally? Paul says 25. What's the biggest obstacle you've overcome in your life? It says Linda's death, which I can only imagine. What was it about Linda that made her such a stabilizing force in your life? Paul says she was just such a super cool girl. She just was. She was super cool. What else do you say about your dead wife in an interview? It's kind of amazing he'd talk about it at all. The last thing I'll share with you guys, it says, the interviewer says, the Beatles' music was always wonderful, but at a certain point, it became something more than entertainment. At what point did you know that the work you were doing was important? Which is an interesting thing to ask, because it's possible that he never felt that way, But Paul says, it's difficult to discuss this without sounding immodest, but I think I started to feel it around the time of Eleanor Rigby. Prior to that, I thought the music was very good, and I realized we were in a different league when we wrote From Me to You, because it had a middle 8 in it and went somewhere we hadn't been before. But you use the word important, speaking to the interviewer. For me, Eleanor Rigby was the start of that. And really isn't anything that sounds like Eleanor Rigby. That's definitely special. And even the covers that people do of it are pretty great, but I don't know, the backing vocals, look at all, it's just beautiful. That's just stuff that I was thinking about this morning over coffee as I was reading this LA Weekly interview, just a quick phoner from 2009. I'll put a link to that in the comments if you wanted to read it down below and check it out. But I also don't want to make it sound like I think Paul McCartney's some perfect person. We all deal with things in different ways. And Paul McCartney seems to deal with fame rather well. Maybe it's because it's been part of his life since he was very, very young. And he just embraced it. And I don't know. I'm just enjoying East Nashville heat. It's mid-90s today, I think, and I'll probably go in a little bit, but I'm going to leave you guys with this video from an interview I did with my buddy J.D. Simo, where he tells a great story about Paul McCartney showing up to a recording session that J.D. was the guitar player on. And it's really good stuff. I'll put it right here. Be sure and watch that. And I'll see you guys somewhere down the road. Much love to you.